Here the focus is on this phenom from Colorado who won slalom gold in Sochi at age 18. Michaela Schifrin wins gold for the U.S. And a year later, continued her world championship reign. Schifrin to the line. Is it going to be enough? Yes!
Hi, this is Lee Eddy here with the Wilmot Mountain Racing crew. I just wanted to give a shout out to all our ski racing friends that are going to be joining us this year. Once the season finally does get rolling and we get past this warm spell and get into the middle of December. But just want to reach out and say hello, share some good news with you. Yesterday and today, Michaela Schifrin did a phenomenal job. Obviously, I think most of you probably saw Michaela Schifrin's victory today by over 3 seconds in the slalom at Aspen. Well, just 2 nights ago, we were lucky enough, and I was lucky enough and honored enough to have an hour-and-a-half interview with Brandon Dijksterhuis, Michaela Schifrin's personal coach and coach for the women's U.S. team. And Brandon and I spent about an hour and a half together online, Adobe Connect. I had a chance to interview Brandon and ask him some questions, some great questions around his coaching style and philosophy, what they've been working on with Michaela. I also asked him several questions from a master's coaching perspective, looking at and working with adults, because he has a phenomenal background in that area as well. He has a great reputation working with the master's crew around the country. So just had a great session. I'm going to be sharing this hour and a half's worth of content, discussion, interview around coaching. I'm going to be sharing this with the Wilmot Mountain Masters coaches. We're going to be looking at the material and working on it together. And we're going to be using that information as we work on our skiing this year and your skiing, work with you on your skiing to help take you to the next level. And also I want to highlight, we're going to be sharing it with USSA Masters, Central Region Masters crew. Ryan Fuller had some great questions that we included in the interview. So with Ryan and his gang, we'll be sharing this information. So just wanted to give you a heads up. Some great material that you're going to hear us chatting about on the hill this year. So if you haven't had a chance to watch the race from Aspen, make sure that you Google it, look it up on YouTube, and watch the runs that Michaela had. Just phenomenal. So thanks. Look forward to talking to you real soon. We'll start updating the Wilmot Mountain Racing website with all of the information as we get some cold weather and get closer to opening and putting some red and blue sticks in the ground. So thanks everybody. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
And hi everyone, I'm Dan Hicks along with Todd Brooker as we welcome you to Aspen, and no doubt about it, Todd, the big favorite is 20-year-old Michaela Schifrin, the 2-time defending world champion as well as the defending Olympic gold medalist.
The fact is, when I talked to her coach, Brandon Dijksterhuis, right after the run, he said, we're not really disappointed because the thing is, she was going fast.
Years later, it was time for Michaela Schifrin to get back into that start gate after the mishap late in the second GS race yesterday.
She had that race and then the third last gate. So these first 10 turns were important for her. She wanted to set the pace, build up some confidence and momentum here. That's what she did. She didn't take the lead in the first section, but she got off on the right foot. And then, in an inspection, and by the way, her coach, Brandon Dijksterhuis, set this first run.
Hi, this is Lee Eddy in Chicago, Illinois, and I am the director and a coach at a small little hill in southern Wisconsin called Wilmot Mountain. And I spend a lot of time with our Masters crew at Wilmot Mountain, as well as a great deal of time with the USSA Adult Masters Racing Program, and hang out with that whole clan, that whole crew here in the Midwest, and specifically the guys out of Minneapolis with Ryan Fuller. And just coming to you from Chicago, but we are very honored today to have with us a very special guest who's chiseled some time out of his busy schedule, because tomorrow is in fact Thanksgiving, and then the very next day, if I've got this right, the very next day is the first race on U.S. soil for the women's U.S. ski team. So he's going to be very busy there. But we have one of the coaches for the women's U.S. team, most specifically works very closely with one of our biggest successes, Michaela Schifrin, and Brandon Dijksterhuis. So Brandon, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks, Lee. Happy to be here.
Pleasure to have you and giving us some of your expertise, your observation, your insights and learnings at an elite level as we talk a little bit more about some of us old fogies on the master circuit. So again, Brandon, thank you very much for your time, and to respect your time, we'll move into our discussion and again look for some of your expertise. But before we do that, if I could just ask you to give, I'm sure most of the audience knows who you are and is very grateful for the work you do and the success you've had. But for some of us that may not, just give us a little bit of your background and how you've aspired to be where you're at today.
It all started off, my father was in the Air Force actually, and we lived in Stuttgart, Germany, and we were stationed in Europe for 5 years, and my family, my mother and father both took up skiing. When I took up skiing, I was 4 years old at the time, and I was fortunate enough that they led a high school group around Europe, and for the first 5 years of my skiing career, I traveled with kids 10 years my senior and got to ski all throughout the Alps, and just had a wonderful experience and fell in love with skiing and ultimately fell in love with ski racing. When we returned to the States, my dad moved to Hill Air Force Base in Ogden, Utah. That's where I took up ski racing out of the Ogden Valley ski team. After that, my father actually retired from the Air Force, and we moved to Seattle to be closer to my parents' family. And upon retirement, he took a new job with Boeing, and 6 months later, he was asked to move to Saudi Arabia. So at the tender age of 13, my dad looked me in the eye and said, how serious are you about ski racing? And at the time, I said, I think I'm serious. And I ended up in a ski academy back east, and spent my high school years there, went on to race for the University of Vermont, continued after UVM to try to make it on the World Cup. Unfortunately, I had a couple pretty big injuries that forced me out of competitive racing. George Brooks at the University of New Mexico was kind enough to hire me as the assistant at the University of New Mexico, where I was able to get a master's degree and continue my love of ski racing. And at the time, I was both racing and coaching with the team. And that's kind of how it all started for me. It wasn't until NCAA championships that year when I watched kids that I had worked with, and they were actually close to my age, but watching them have success, that I realized that, wow, this coaching is pretty fun, and I think I can have an impact. And here we are 15 years later.
An elite level with the experience that you have. Everything a lot of times does come back to the basics. As you think about ski racing, as you think about adults that are either re-engaging in the sport or, showing up every day trying to get better, what are some of the foundational pieces that we've got to continue to remind ourselves of?
It's been a real pleasure working with someone like Michaela, whose foundation is rock solid, and seeing some, you can have racers come through who are more or less fads for a week here, a week there. They can be fast, but they don't have the foundation to be consistent week in and week out. Injected slope to hard man-made, steep to flat. And I think just to encourage that learning process, each and every turn counts, and making the most of your time. And I think that any individual, regardless of whether they're an adult or a child, really thrive when they feel like they're making improvements in their own skiing or their own athletics. So just to continue with that every day.
Ourselves, is older folks that race and coach, what are we looking for when we're just going out and spending time on the hill together? And
you mentioned masters, and I think it's even more important for as we age. We're not quite as limber as we used to be. I would say more of us than not have to go to work every Monday morning. So that unnecessary risk by doing a flashy move, being out of balance, I don't think it does anyone any good.
Michaela Schifrin can pick up her second world title at the age of 19. Michaela Schifrin can pick up her second world title.
So I turned the audio off. Just
So that's actually a great place to stop if you want to stop.
Yeah, I was, because I'm thinking of the discussion now between the transition, and I turned their audio off of, I think it was NBC, just because um, I think your input's a little more valid on this conversation than theirs. So, yeah, what do you see there?
You know, just watching out of the gate, it kind of horrifies me to look at it, and I actually remember it like it was yesterday. Um, but the line was so conservative right out of the gate, and not only would I be worried about her losing time, but she's climbing up the hill so much that she actually puts her in a position where strategy.
When you see this piece of the video, even right there, between the gates, the end of one, the start of the next, which is a big part of the discussion right now. What do you look for there? Or what do you see that she's, that she's doing well? And what do you talk about when you talk about that phase of the turn with her?
So just looking at that specific picture, we talk a lot about facing out, and facing out is arc humanly possible, and obviously that creates and causes it requires an incredible deal of strength, and also you have to have the equipment that can support that aggressive of a line. Um, I think for the Masters crowd, and especially those struggling with consistency or just trying to improve on a day-to-day basis, spread.
Well, and then maybe initially, maybe taking that first shot before the race.
Right, whatever it
Um,
takes.
and, a little bit of a transition here to obviously one that you remember very, very well. Most recently is just maybe a couple takeaways on the GS here. So we'll go ahead and play this.
Michaela Schifrin also having a solid run. She tied last year for the victory with the skier who is out now, Fenninger. So it looked like it was over season for her.
So I'll go ahead and come through this a little bit to maybe the Seaford section here. And maybe just what I'll do is when we get a little better camera angle here that you can describe, I'll freeze it right at the top of the end of the turn, top of the next turn. What is something that you would highlight or point out here that Masters racers need to be more aware of that will help them with their transition and their speed, their setup?
Again, it would be very similar to what we just described in slalom. So having that body position that you're actually facing out into the top of the turn.
What to over the last couple of days, I talked to one of our guys that just puts in, and you might even know him. He puts in a ton of work here in the Midwest. I do some races and do some coaching at a small little hill in southern Wisconsin. He puts a ton of work in representing the USSA program in the Midwest. His name is Ryan Fuller, and he really runs the whole deal for the Midwest, and he's one of the coaches also. He said, hey, if you got time on the horn with somebody like Brandon, I got some questions. So here's
fantastic.
Here's what I think myself and all of us, our crew here in the Midwest, but I think a lot of folks are going to get a chance to see this video and learn from you and from the experience that you've had. I want to personally thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Lee. It's been a pleasure.
And also, obviously, thank you for the work that you're doing to create the excitement in the sport right now. It's on Saturday mornings, man. We wake up around the country and see what happened overseas, and it can define our day on Saturday and Sunday. Just how well the gang did, and that's a big result of the hard work you're putting in. So thank you on that respect too.
Thanks. It's an honor to be able to work with such great athletes.